Thank you, Raphael, and I would like to thank all of our speakers from the past 2 days. This has been an outstanding meeting. I'd also like to thank again my workshop planning committee, Rima, Raphael, Doug, and Baruch, Jennifer and Janet, and the outstanding team at the NAM, CC, Ayano, and the support staff. This has been a wonderful 2 days. I'm really looking forward to the challenge of summarizing what we've experienced, and I'm going to pass the mic to Lonnie to provide some closing thoughts about what we've heard this morning.
Okay, well, let me add my thanks and and apologies to presenters that these are my biases that I picked up in a few highlights. There's many other highlights. The good news is that this workshop is going to result in a proceedings. So that will be available, and just check with CC to make sure that was true. That's been our tradition, and so you'll see a nice proceedings into the future that really presents this in a much more cogent and better way that I'm going to try right now. So we have that to look forward to. And I think the PowerPoint presentations in the past have also been available over time. It's a nice way to go back and kind of review these, and I find them very helpful, especially when I'm making presentations now. So for me, I would probably take that first page of that proceedings and put Raphael's slide up, which was this the word cloud. So if you looked at that word cloud this morning, 150 people that said, you know, what's it going to take to really counter some of the issues we have in communications? So I just wrote a few down: trust, transparency, miscommunications and how to handle that, timeliness, resources, collaboration, integration, adaptiveness, messaging, communities, handling rumors and confronting them, risk communications, crisis communications, awareness, balance, social media, etc. So for the last day and a half, we've had all those terms come up. And I think we've addressed a lot of those. That's a lot more about communications than I started back in CDC back when, Catherine. And so it is really being transformed, I think, as a science and with the knowledge of how important this really is as we move forward. So that word cloud for me really kind of captured that. A couple other things that came to mind this morning was listening to Reverend Sumo was, you know, it was the perfect storm. The worst possible scenario actually took place, and how Ebola really got out of hand in 3 countries, and especially he talked about Liberia. He talked about, you know, how to counteract these in the midst of distress, fear, stigmatization of patients. Really difficult moving forward. He talked about acquiring data and how critical that was, and without data you couldn't really focus your message or make adjustments to it. So acquiring that data was essential as we went along. Dr. Anoka then talked about, which I brought about, was I think there's an interdisciplinarity of communication teams. So we talk about that in the academic world and are pushing to de-silo ourselves. Same thing's happening. Communication is getting much more sophisticated. And we have social anthropologists playing major roles in this, IT experts, sociologists, and other experts. It's really important to think this team's becoming more and more sophisticated, and obviously they're going to improve as we go ahead. She also talked about the need of integrating data and messaging. The data changes, but that is our communications into communities. That is our flow back into alter and changing those messages. I liked her idea that in the midst of all this science, it's still about people, and empathy is a big part of that. And if you aren't sincere and really talk about the human issues that are involved in these terrible outbreaks, right, you lose credibility right away. I don't care how smart you are. So that empathy part, I think, was really important. And then Catherine talked about Zika, and I like the idea of reminding ourselves that we begin with goals. You know, you begin with the end in mind. And the messaging is just not a message. It is, how do you achieve that end point? What is it we're trying to do? How does that alter people's behavior? And is the message really true to that? So and the logic model that we showed later on really goes to understanding what that outcome is, and then mapping backwards and making sure that we get those steps done. She said, I like the adage, it's not what you say, it's what you hear, and how true that is. And so if this two-way communication and information from our communities back to our community, to our communication experts isn't in place, we'll miss that. And so I think it's a really important strategy as we moved ahead. And then she talked about being strategic. Don't be afraid of fear. It's part of what we're going to address, but it's how we manage it. And then understand the multiple villages, that there isn't a single monolith when it comes to communications. They're everywhere. And the coordination of these different villages is really a work in progress, and so important as we move forward. And then we really talked about the international framework. It was really helpful. It was one of the objectives of what we were doing and the lessons that were learned. And the one thing I've been picking up all along in the last day and a half is the idea that the communication strategy really is about more and more about science. It really is about their researchable questions. When you think about that, there are scholarly endeavors, and we are creating knowledge. As we learn, as we go back, as we improve, lessons learned are really new knowledge created. And that really is about discovery. And when we do that, then we are able to manage and improve as we go. So it's kind of true to our folks in science that this is actually what's being done. And that creation of that knowledge then is implied in much more effective ways as we move ahead. We talked about the importance of evaluation and this joint external evaluation team that came in, and what an important aspect that was. That in the international health regulations, that risk communication was one of the core capacities. Maybe not funded very well, but certainly acknowledged as one of the real core capacities as we move forward. I like to take away from Zika that the key was global multi-partner coordination and the resources necessary to put it together and do it. I think that rings true across everything that I heard. And then your comments about being evidence-based, involving all government, and I think, and beyond, and not just return on investment, but a cost of not doing something. We need to think about evolving technology and including the social and operational aspects of that, and matching people and resources. And then I like the idea of hearing about the who. And really understanding and defining who's the risk communicator. And so often we think it's just a communication health expert, and we know now it's much more than that. And people have to have skill sets in various parts of that outbreak to do that well. Developing of standard operating procedures. So it gives us then tools and actions and responsibilities to actually implement. And I think those SOPs are really, really important. I like the toolkit idea as we kind of go along, and the role of the private sector. So that's about as fast as I could write with 2 cups of coffee this morning. I hope that helps summarize what I thought was really a great half a day. And then just in a final reflection on our total time together over the last day and a half, I think we're successful when we go back and examine what it was we were trying to do. So we said the objectives were to examine the key elements of communication capacity necessary to address ID threats. So I think we can check that off, at least in my mind I can. Examine the current state of science regarding public engagement and trust, understanding and risk of health protective behaviors, and behavioral responses. We did that. Assess implications of IHR, lessons learned from recent outbreaks. Did a really nice job of that today, and it was a really good discussion. And then discuss research needs, opportunities, barriers for collaboration within epidemiology, biomedical, social, behavioral science communities. That's the multidisciplinarity, interdisciplinarity of what we need to do. So great stuff. And going back to say, did we do those things? In my mind, we did. I think there's evidence all along that we've done that. We started off with 3 really great keynoters, and then we talked about laying the foundation, achieving effective communications, and actually the international context and lessons learned. So my compliments to our planning committee and Jeff for chairing that. It was put together and integrated very nicely. It's something we have been talking about 2 or 3 years to do this. I'm glad we finally did. We get so involved sometimes, as I do, in the molecular stuff and genomics and gene editing and all the excitement that we forget that, this is really part of what we do, and maybe we don't do it so well. And I think it's a good pushing the pause button and stepping back and understanding the importance of doing that. So thank you for these outstanding presenters. I appreciate the forum's indulgent in this, and also the people who've been online, who've been watching and listening. We appreciate your involvement over the last day and a half in the workshop. So I think this workshop was timely. It was certainly insightful and very productive. And I thank everybody involved with that, and for your hard work and talent. And again, just to thank Cece and Yano and Anand in putting this together, and also thanks and congratulations to Julie Pavlin, who's not here. No, she is. She's around the corner. Who also is going to be very instructive as part of our membership of this forum. We're really glad that she's also, along with Cece, will help give us the leadership and guidance as we move forward. And then to end, we had a wonderful dinner last night for many of the people in the room, and it was the celebration of 20 years of this forum. Perhaps one of, if not the longest, one of the longest organizations within the National Academies. And how proud we were to be members of this forum. The productivity, how many books have been put out? 200, I don't know, it just kind of blew my mind. Then I thought, thinking how many I actually get involved with, and it was a lot of time. But it was remarkable. And then Tony Fauci saying, the one thing that's constant and certain is emerging infectious diseases. And if you think they're going to end, they aren't. They're really accelerating. All the conditions and factors are in place. And his hope to engage and be involved for the next 20 years as this forum continues to reinvent itself and being innovative as we go into the future. So it's been a very good day and a half. I appreciate everybody's attendance. Safe travels, and we hope to stay connected. Thank you.